Okay. I don't know what's going on YouTube right now, but I'm going to go ahead and welcome everybody that's here to our meeting. There we go. I think Chris has got me now. It's again, just like last month, going to be a little bit different because you've got Zoom, you've got in person. That's not coming from mine. Okay.
No, it's just waiting.
Okay. We end up with echoes here in the room, so I just wanted to make sure I have my AirPods in, so hopefully the audio will come through a little bit better through the internet. For those of you in the room who don't know, we do have access to the City of Arlington Wi-Fi. It's under COA Online, and it's unsecured and free to use. So go ahead and sign in if you want to. The presentation will be Zoom. I believe our presenter is out of state, and so that will be presented via Zoom. Does anybody have an HDMI cord to their computer? Okay, we'll have to remember that for next time. Phil thinks maybe we can get through here for the summer, but this has an HDMI connection. So if we can get a, yeah. So next month we'll know. Next month we'll know. Then we could see it all up here. Yeah. So for right now, we'll just be watching it on our the presentation, at least watching it on our laptops, iPads, phones, whichever. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who came tonight, those of you who made it to the Arlington room, and for those of you who are out on Zoom, thank you for being here. Again, it's a little bit of a different location than we had from last month. I want to thank Phil Stage. He worked with the City of Arlington to get us this room, and it has actually more room to spread out. So as we grow, we'll have plenty of space for people. And if those of you still want some space, you can have it. We do have access to tables for those of you who want a table to sit up on. And, you know, some of you may feel more comfortable with that. The great thing about this room is the city is letting us use it gratis for free. So that's very helpful as we're getting through to when UNT opens back up, and that'll probably still be September. I don't know if they'll change their mind or not, but right now it still sets at September. So it's so much better than having to spend a lot of money for a hotel meeting room and stuff like that as we grow. For those of you who don't know, I'm Michelle Theisen. I'm the current president of Fort Worth Astronomical Society. And we hope that as the months progress, we see more people at the in-person meetings. I know this one, the last month we were at the north side of the area. This month we're on the east side of the area. And hopefully, again, by the middle of the summer or September, we'll be back centrally located at UNT, you know, where some of our people from Weatherford find it more convenient to get to. Anyway, I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. It's just going to be real good to see everybody getting back together. Want to say welcome to all the new members who've come in this past month. We have Danny Klein. We have the family of Mike Hopke. There is the family of Jennifer Judge and Steve Schrank. And then a brand new member just joined yesterday is a high school student, Arya Karantha, and I hope I got that last name right. So we'll find out. I also want to recognize our board members, those who are executive officers and our board members. Again, I'm the president. Ed Gill, he's on the Zoom conference, and he's our vice president. John Geramini is here in the room with us. He's our treasurer this year. Our board members are Tom Roth, Cy Simonson, Jerry Gardner, and Larry Barker. I know Tom is here in the room. I saw that Cy had signed on Zoom, and then I'm not sure about Jerry, and I heard that Larry has a river that's running between him and his workshop out where he lives right now. So he's probably dealing with that if he's not on the Zoom call. Zach Smith is currently acting as secretary. He's one of our members who came in last August, and he's agreed to act as secretary until we can get that position filled permanently. He won't be able to actually be the secretary and fill the board position until he's gotten to be a member for 1 year, which is in August. For those of you who aren't familiar with the club history, just want to go through that, especially some of our new members. The Fort Worth Astronomical Society is one of the first adult astronomy clubs in the country, and it was founded by Charlie Mary Noble. That was 72 years ago in 1949. And it grew actually out of a junior astronomy club where the parents were bringing their kids. The parents showed an interest, and so they formed the adult club, which is what we have today, our Fort Worth Astronomical Society. Right now, we have 171 members and their families as members of our club, and we invite everyone to participate. We have club members who they bring a wide range of interests. We have, binocular observers, we have telescope observers, we have those who do astrophotography. And so everyone in our club is more than willing to help you as you want to learn different things about the astronomical world. And so just if you have any questions, reach out either at one of our in-person meetings or through the e-group. If you have a question about something, put it out there and you'll probably get 5 different responses. So just remember that. Something else to remember is that the Fort Worth Astronomical Society is a nonprofit organization. So if you've got some extra money laying around, we'll be more than happy to put it into our treasury. And then you can also use that as a tax donation. Star parties. We did have one scheduled for this past Saturday, and it didn't happen. Our backup date is this coming Saturday. I think that's the 22nd. Yes. And right now, the weather is not looking real good, but Pam will keep in touch with us via the e-group, and she will let us know the final call, how that will work. You never know in Texas, the weather could clear. Who knows? We'll find out Saturday. If we do get together this weekend, we want to go ahead and remind you that it's going to be a little bit different from the star parties we experienced before March of last year. So we are going to ask the members who are sharing their scopes or their binoculars, and we're also going to be asking those who come if they will wear a mask. I hear the governor came out with brand new orders today. Have not even had a chance to look at those, so I do not know how those will or will not affect us. But at very minimum, it can be a request. It would be great if we can have one or more of our astrophotographers out there, someone who observes usually with a computer screen, and that'll allow more people to actually come and look at stuff without crowding around and waiting in line to view through a scope. And if you've got some extra time and you just want to come monitor the crowds and just sort of help and, keep people from maybe, bundling together too much, or at least groups that aren't familiar with each other, then that would be more than welcome. So for personal viewing, we actually have 2 dark sky sites that are available to us. Again, our new members, we do ask that you don't go to the sites without first going there with someone from the club. That person can orient you as to where the restrooms are located, where the supplies are located, where the storage sheds are, what to do at the beginning, what to do at the end of your night. And that's just the best practice. You have to remember these are dark sky sites. They're out in the middle of nowhere. And so sometimes it's always good just to be with somebody so you can follow them in, because a couple of them have some twisty, curvy turns to get there. One of our sites is in Decatur. It is the Thompson Foundation land that's out in Decatur. Out there, you have electricity available. There is a restroom available. And then if you'll see the files in the e-group, you should be able to get the access code for the gate. A couple of people have emailed me this week asking about the regulations. The last word we have, and Mike Honor is our liaison, he said he had checked with Lisa, and last word we have is that they still had restrictions on the numbers of people. Since Thompson is a location that we are invited to, and we are there as their guests, we do sort of abide by their rules, whether you agree with them or not. We do need to be polite and respect what their decisions are. So just remember that for Thompson Foundation. And I've seen, I think it's George has usually been the person who's sort of counting the number of people who say they're going out there that night. Our second location is in Ranger, Texas. It's out west a couple of hours. That is Star Ranch. That is a location that we lease from Preston Star, a member of our club. At that location, you do not have electricity from power lines. We do have electricity available through solar power. And I've had a couple of the astrophotographers tell me that they've actually run their equipment off of that power and run it through the night. So it's not too dinky. It was set up by club members several years ago, and so it apparently works quite well. I know it worked very well for helping to charge batteries and everything while we were building that deck out there. so it works pretty well that way. We do have a composting toilet available. It's in the smaller of the sheds out there. Water is not available, so you'll definitely want to take your own water for drinking. If you're a smoker, please be very careful about where you might put your cigarette butts. Put them in a container and take them back with you, but please don't put them in the dry grass, because this can be. Now, there is a fire extinguisher. If you see anything happen, there is a fire extinguisher in the large shed, and it was still charged when we checked it a few weeks ago when we were out there. Again, you'll want to check the files in the e-group so that you can get the access code to get to that gate. And reminder, when you're leaving, for those of you who aren't familiar, you always want to take that lock when you're locking at the end of the evening, and it locks with another lock and a chain link. Never two links together, because that just gets everybody confused and people get locked out, and we've had people get locked in. So always a padlock and a chain link. And I think that's all the information I had for intro, just to sort of get everybody through. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ed. Ed is on Zoom, and I believe our presentation is on Zoom. And Ed, I already have everything set for share screen, so you should be able to switch on, and our guests should be able to switch on and share with everybody.
All right. Well, we'll see how this goes. And I want to introduce Mr. Douglas Struble from Taylor, Michigan. He's a suburb of Detroit. And the talk tonight is going to be...
We have access to the city's Wi-Fi. It's COA.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. And the topic is going to be astrophotography from a light polluted site, which is something all of us in the Metroplex know absolutely nothing about, since I think we can compete with Douglas. I think we're at portal 9, maybe 10 if they were off the scale. It's a problem, and it's a problem for visual astronomers too.
Hey, Ed, for some reason the YouTube keeps going back and forth to the opening person. Oh, yeah, it seems fine now.
Whoever is talking, the YouTube YouTube will jump to whoever's talking. So if you're not talking, go ahead and put mute, and that way it won't jump to you accidentally like it did to Michelle. And I'm just going to turn it over to you right now, Doug, and see if we can share screen, and we'll go from there. So now Douglas Struble from Taylor, Michigan, and it's all yours.
Hey, nice to meet all you guys. I like Ed mentioned, I wanted to talk about imaging from a light polluted area, and this is of course strictly astrophotography, not visual. It'd be pretty hopeless to do visual here. I guess I'll share my screen and getting started here. And I'm sure you can see my screen okay?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So I kind of want to do a brief introduction real quick about how I got into this hobby and what led me to where I was at. Everybody has an interesting story, I'm sure. And then once I get through this, we'll talk about astrophotography in a light polluted area, and then go into some questions and answers and whatnot, in order to help out people that might have some questions and moving forward with what they want to accomplish. So first of all, when I was a teenager, my uncle, Robert Nagy, got me really big into astronomy. He used to have an 8-inch Celestron SCT back in the 80s. When I was a teenager, or actually a kid, I used to write astronauts all the time, including the Apollo 11 crew, among others. And, I was born in 72, so this is well after, they originally landed on the moon. My uncle, Robert Nagy, was the one that really got me into astronomy when I was a kid, but, I did not appreciate it back then as much as I do now, of course. And I really, over the past, I would say 15 years, wanted to get into astrophotography. And I kind of studied the way things were coming along with technological advancements and what we could do. Back in the day, you were left with film, and film was really hard to deal with. And over the past, I want to say maybe 10 years, I started, researching CMOS and CCD cameras, but I didn't really have the money to do what I feel do it justice. So I kind of never really got into it a whole lot, and I was kind of waiting until I saved up some money. And then something happened back in 2016, where a drunk driver totaled my Challenger SRT8 in my driveway, and I had it paid off quite a bit, and I got a check from State Farm, and I was like, as opposed to buying another hot rod, I think I was going to start building, some equipment that would do astrophotography really well. So they say that every story begins with alcohol. That's good. In this particular case, it wasn't me. It was the driver that ended up totaling my car. So it was a pretty hot mess. And then the police were called out, whatever. But I do miss my car quite a bit. It was a lot of fun. But I will tell you what, doing astrophotography is a lot more rewarding and challenging than driving around a hot rod. And when I first started out, I started off with a Celestron SCT, in my backyard, and I would go to parks. You guys can hear me okay, right? Okay, cool. So I started out, in the backyard, kind of experimenting a little bit. I bought a Windows laptop computer to run some of the software, and I was doing some planetary work, at the very beginning. Back in 2000, it was the spring of 2016, I was doing some planetary work with Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn. I had some good results, but, when you do planetary work, it kind of gets boring rather quick because there's only so many, solar system bodies to image. So I started getting into doing deep space, and I got a Hyperstar for my Celestron, and a color camera. It was a ASI 1600 MC color camera, cool. And this is the very first image I did with deep space. This is M51. I know it's kind of hard to tell because it looks really bad, but and after time, I realized that going with a mono camera, especially with a heavily light polluted area, gives me a lot more control of each of the color channels. And 2 years later, I was able to do something like this right here of M51. So this is kind of where I'm at right here, in the Detroit area. And as you can see, where this sad face is here is where I'm located at. It's a Boral 8 white zone area, pretty much. I have a couple friends that image from this area too, and it can be done. It just requires a lot more integration time. It requires a lot more shorter exposures. Sometimes I get people that tell me, you know, on Facebook, people that follow me or what have you, you know, if you would do 15-minute exposures, you'd pull out a lot more information. Well, the problem being is that you overwhelm the sensor on the camera, you know, and your histogram gets all debunked, you know, it gets all messed up. So really what you need to do is a lot of short exposures and then integrate all those short exposures. It eats up a lot more hard drive space than you normally would, but that's pretty much the only way to do it without overwhelming the sensor on the astrophotography camera. So that's pretty much what I do. I do some narrowband. I try to avoid it at all possible. I try to go after, I do a lot of broadband, some broadband, but I try to go after narrowband as much as possible because it gives me a little bit more of an edge, being such a small sliver of the visual spectrum with all the light pollution here. And then in 2017, I realized that if I'm going to do a lot of exposure time, I need to make it easy, and I need to automate my system. So what I did was I built a slide-off roof observatory. I did some rough drawings of what I thought were a good design based off of several different other people's slide-off roofs that I found on the internet. And one thing that I realized was if I want to set up multiple rigs, a dome would not be a good fit for me, because I mean that's really good for one telescope, but if you want to run, you know, 2 more or what have you telescopes, a slide off is a much better decision, and it can be more cost effective too. So in 2017, I started building a slide off in my backyard, and it wasn't really all that expensive, really. I mean, I you know, laid the concrete. I hired a contractor to build what I was looking for based off the plans I drew up, and I think it was maybe $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000 at the end of the day. And then I ran electricity to it, you know, via underground from my house. And then I had a problem with the trees in the backyard. So I talked to my neighbor in the south and to let me cut down some of the tree line down. But I still only in the south can only get down to about M51, you know, with the Pillars of Creation. That's about as far south as I can go. And then I built a permanent pier. I went to a local company that does a lot of metal work, and I designed a pier I was looking for, and they built it, and then they powder coated it for me, and then ultimately I ended up with this slide off observatory in my backyard. And this is like a couple shots of it here, and this little shed thing next to it is where I keep a lot of other equipment that I'm not currently using. Inside the observatory itself, I have 2 rigs. I have my primary rig on an astrophysics Mach 1 mount that's built off the pier, and it has an Explorer Scientific 165 millimeter APO with FL35 glass, and it does really well. The focal length on it is 1155, so I'm able to capture a lot of smaller stuff. And then my second rig, which is the one in the back, is more mobile. I kept it mobile on purpose so I could like move it around or take it places. But I always have both rigs going at the same time, and I have 2 separate Windows laptops that are controlling each rig, and I monitor them from inside the house with TeamViewer with my Mac Pro. And it's another shot here at the home position. So in my studio, so I have a studio. I do a lot of advertising production, but I'm able to supplement that with the work I do, on both systems, so I can monitor my integration over the night while I'm working on actual work, and then I'll monitor things on the one monitor here. So you'll see like I have a IP camera below both telescopes that kind of show me the clouds and the orientation of the telescopes. And then I have Sequence Generator Pro on both laptops running each rig. And then, from there, I've actually been able to produce a lot of good things given the amount of light pollution here, to the point where I'm featured in a lot of magazines like Sky and Telescope, Astronomy Magazine, and a magazine overseas called the BBC Sky at Night. And then with my second rig, I run a Stellar View, and I'm featured on there a lot with Stellar View of the Week. And I've actually won Stellar View of the Year for 2018 and 2019. I've tried to write some papers. One was for Explorer Scientific, talking about planetary nebula and how I go about trying to capture some of that. There's a link to that that I'll provide later. And then I did another article for Zoo cameras, because that's mostly what I use is Zoo cameras. And then so I kind of wanted to dive into some of my work here. Most of it, most of the stuff that I do well tends to be narrowband, just because of the amount of light pollution here. So when I'm doing narrowband here, I mostly try to concentrate on short exposure. So even with narrowband, I'm only doing 2-minute subs at about 200 gain, and with a 33 offset and negative 20 degrees Celsius. But I really pile on the data. So if you look down here, like this particular object was 36.4 hours between hydrogen alpha and oxygen, and able to, to pull that off. I guess that's kind of my niche. Dealing with a larger APO, I've been trying to do more smaller planetary nebula, like the Cat's Eye. This was done with HA and oxygen. With a lot of times I'll add in like an hour each of RGB just to get some star color, to add some color to it. In this particular case, I had to do a different exposure time for the center because it was blown out otherwise. So I did oxygen and 120-second exposures, 2 minutes, and then 1 minute exposures at 0 gain. So I guess at this time, like I said, I'd love to help out other people who live in a heavily light polluted area like I do. And if people have some questions, I would love to help them out. I guess at this point, if there's any questions that you guys might have.
Yeah, Doug, for folks that reach out to you, do you do that through your Facebook page? Is that the best way to contact you and say, hey, I'm doing this and what do you recommend? Or do you?
Yeah, I get a lot of messages on Facebook asking me, for advice on certain things. that's probably the best avenue. I also get some people on Astrobin. I do have an Astrobin account too that ask me some questions as well. So those are probably the two primary avenues for people to reach out in terms of questions or things I can possibly help them out with. Is there anybody out there that's been having problems with imaging with light pollution and perhaps needs some guidance or some help on some suggestions of what to do?
Do you talk about your processing? Is that possible?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's interesting you should ask that. So, like, when I first started doing this, I really wanted to learn everything about PixInsight. So I do a lot of I do all my pre-processing in PixInsight. And then I used to try to do as much as possible post-processing in PixInsight too. But then I realized that Photoshop offers a lot more capability to finesse and to isolate certain things than PixInsight does. So I kind of reverted back to where I'm still doing most of my pre-processing in PixInsight. I'll do some stuff like background extraction, and I'll do some MMT, but most of it I go back to Photoshop to really blend certain layers together, because that's a major problem with PixInsight is it doesn't deal with layers. It gives you less opportunity to do, to fudge certain things, with sharpening and whatnot. So I've kind of gone back to Photoshop in terms of post-processing a lot more than I was a couple of years ago.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Sure.
So, what's your method for picking your exposure times? You just trial and error, or are you measuring your subs and?
So yeah, which I've been using the ASI 1600 on both rigs for probably 3 or 4 years. At one point, I did some testing. I tested the signal to noise ratio on that camera, running 139 gain at 21 offset, and running 200 gain at 33 offset. And I found that my signal to noise ratio with narrowband was a lot better at 200 or at 2-minute subs with the 33 offset. So that's why I continue to use both with hydrogen, sulfur, and oxygen. I use 200 gain with a 33 offset. And I did buy a new camera recently. I bought a Zoo 183. I'm going to try it out on my 6.5-inch APO. It's going to bring me down to about 48 arcseconds per pixel, which is probably below my seeing level, but I'm going to try to give it a try anyways. If it doesn't work out, I'm going to switch it to my second rig, which is my 102 Stellar View, and I'm sure it would do fine there. But I'm just curious to see, because I keep doing smaller and smaller objects. Most everything in this universe, the objects are pretty small, and I've been doing objects now that are down to 0.3 arc minutes. And when you're dealing with an APO at only 1155 millimeters of focal length, it's not the greatest thing, but I'm able to finesse a lot of the processing, well, post-processing, I'll use stuff like StarNet to remove stars. I'll use something called Topaz AI sharpening. But there's like no one magic bullet. I have to like do a little bit here, a little bit there. Otherwise, it starts to look unnatural, or otherwise you start to pull out detail that isn't naturally there, which is something I try to avoid.
Do you have much, I was going to ask if you have much opportunity to process dark nebula, or is that something
I tell you what, I'll show you my one attempt that I did on the LBN here. It was the Iris Nebula, and LBNs and a Boreal 8 or it's usually doesn't go very well. you don't get that natural brown look. You have to kind of fudge it. So let me pull up I did the Iris I think a couple of years ago. Where's it at here? And LBNs, I just try to avoid them. I mean, picking up dark nebula here is hopeless. Okay, well, here's one right here. I can't remember how old this one is. Yeah, so I mean, that's the Iris Nebula. You see some brown here. I mean, that's the brown wasn't naturally existing. I had to kind of fudge the data a little bit. There was another one that I did that was even better, but yeah, LBN objects, dark nebula. It's something I can't really do here a whole lot. I did take my telescope up north once recently, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and did the the Dark Shark Nebula, and it turned out rather well. But because of I own a media advertising company, I can't really get out a whole lot to go to star parties and whatnot. But this is one I did. Gosh, this is a long time. It's back in 2017 of the Dark Shark Nebula in darker skies. But yeah, LBNs, Dark Nebula, usually pretty much a no-go here.
Yeah, I wanted to encourage some of the new members or the people that have not tried or are thinking of trying astrophotography. We all know the frustration of observing from a light polluted site. That's why we have our dark sky sites, and if you can get out there, it's a great advantage. But if you have questions for Douglas and you're just a little maybe intimidated or just not sure what narrowband imaging means and what it is, please feel free to ask. And I was going to ask you, Doug, the narrowband can be real narrow or not so narrow. So I don't know.
That's a good question you bring up.
Narrow.
Yeah, so when it comes to doing narrowband, the lower the NM is, the better, especially with oxygen. So like on my one rig, I run Astrodon filters at 6 NM for sulfur and hydrogen, but with oxygen I run at 3 NM. And the reason why is because there's a lot of LED lights going up. And even on my second rig, I'll run, even though they're all astronomic filters, at 7 NM for hydrogen and sulfur. I run a 3 NM Astrodon, which has a different focal plane, so I have to adjust for that. But oxygen is always going to be the most effective one when it comes to light pollution. And getting a lower NM rating on an oxygen filter is, I think, to me, is paramount. Otherwise, you start getting some weird gradients and whatnot.
Hey, why are you going so wide with your sulfur? Was it cost, or is there something that you're including in there besides the sulfur band?
Sulfur band tends to be the weakest, so I don't have to worry about it so much.
Oh, so what do you like? You're picking up. You just got wide. You got a wider band, so you're picking up.
Yeah. So hydrogen, oxygen tend to be the strongest. Sulfur is tended to be the weakest. If you're talking about the traditional Hubble palette, so I'm not so concerned with the sulfur because it's a very weak signal to begin with, and I'm able to if I do have a gradient problem, which is I usually don't with sulfur, like I do hydrogen. It usually is not much of a problem. So usually those two bands I don't have to worry about so much. It's the oxygen band that's usually the major consideration.
So you're not so worried about light pollution getting in your sulfur, getting through your sulfur transmission.
Yeah, I don't have much of a problem with sulfur and hydrogen. Just a really light background extraction will resolve that, and I'll look at what it took out, and it's a very light gradient. It's not much. The oxygen one is the one is a lot more affected by light pollution.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I had a question on the aesthetics. Since you're shooting with a black and white camera, all your images, of course, are black and white. And the Hubble palette is a famous palette for assigning colors to the different channels. Do you generally stick with the Hubble palette, or do you use artistic license, or how do you decide on the aesthetics of what your color balancing and assigning the colors to your different channels?
So that's a good question. When it comes to planetary nebula, most of what you see in a planetary nebula is hydrogen and oxygen. You don't see any sulfur in a planetary nebula normally. So when the white dwarf collapses, obviously it doesn't turn into a nova. It blows out a lot of oxygen and hydrogen, and that's mostly what you get. When you get into some of these other nebula, like the Pac-Man nebula, like the one you're seeing here, you're dealing with a lot of sulfur in there too. That is usually what determines what I'm going to particularly do and what kind of palette I'm gonna focus on. So planetary nebula, hydrogen, oxygen. I'll do RGB stars to give us some color. When it comes to some of these other nebula, like the Pac-Man and what have you, I'll do I'll do usually a full Hubble palette or show palette, and then sometimes I'll go back and I'll do like a bicolor palette and a hydrogen oxygen, which tends to be a little bit more natural. So like this one right here, this is Sharpless 96. It's a giant supernova nebula. This isn't the whole nebula itself. This is just the most prominent area where there's a certain knot on the nova that was the most interesting part, and that's what I'll focus on. But you need to do your research in terms of what's going to work out with sulfur. But for just as a note, planetary nebula, no sulfur. Just stick with the hydrogen alpha and oxygen. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Got a quick question for you, Doug.
Sure.
I know that you switched from your 152 Explorer Scientific to the 165, one being the FCD1 glass, the other one being the FPL53.
Correct.
Just wondering if you noticed any difference in the picture quality or the color arrangement within, switching from the FCD1 to the FPL53.
It's funny you should ask. Someone else asked me that recently, a couple months ago. And I think given my seeing conditions with my skies, I haven't really noticed much of a difference. One problem I was having was when I was doing RGB stars with some of these planetary nebulas, sometimes I would shoot low in the horizon. And the problem when you do that is that you're fighting a lot of atmospheric distortion, just like you would if you were shooting a planet low. So what I started doing was I started shooting my RGB data for the stars closer to zenith, and you're fighting a lot more or less atmospheric distortion. And what was happening was I was getting stars that would color shift to magenta or green, and it was a major problem. I mean, I still get that while I'm here, but it's a less a problem at zenith. So to answer your question, I haven't really noticed a huge difference between the two levels of glass. What I wanted was a little bit more aperture and about the same focal length. And to be honest with you, I'm friends with Scott Roberts over at Explorer Scientific, and he gave me a hell of a deal on the 165. And that's why I upgraded from the 152. I think that the glass quality, you're going to benefit more in a darker area. If I were to guess, maybe a Boreal sky scale of 5 or less, you would start to see more of a difference. But that's been my experience with it.
Yeah, I have a question. Since you're doing a lot of small objects, planetary nebula, and you're working at, well, you said 1150 millimeters of focal length, something
Yes.
of that order. Had you considered going to like a Ritchie Chrétien or a Schmidt-Cassegrain to get upwards of 1,500 to 2,000 millimeters, or is the issue there just how fast the instrument is? It's going to be too slow, or tracking?
Actually, it's really neither one of those things. The problem I have here, so like this is an object I did recently, NGC 6058. This thing's 0.38 by 0.2 arc minutes. The problem being with when you're dealing with any mirror-based telescope, whether it's a Newtonian, an SCT, or an RC, you run into a lot more problems in a light polluted area where the light pollution starts to leak into the system. Like, I had a 12-inch truss Newtonian with a shroud, and even though I had a shroud, the light pollution was leaking in and overwhelming the telescope at certain points when it was pointed at a certain point of the sky. When it came to an RC, you run into problems where if it is not exactly at the same focusing point, then when you do flats, it starts to look like a weird beveled donut. So running a mirrored-based telescope system in a heavy light polluted area is a lot less forgiving because of all the light leaks everywhere. So because of that, I've stuck with APOs, and I've tried a 10-inch RC, I tried a 12-inch Newtonian at f4, and of course my original telescope was an SCT, and you get a lot of problems. And then once you go below like 40 degrees in any direction around the horizon, the mirrored-based telescope starts to get flooded with a lot more light pollution, and your subs are almost unusable, where I can go down with an APO down to 20 degrees and my ADUs will rise a little bit, but they're still usable.
No, that's good information for folks that are going to be city-based and what kind of system to be, looking at if you're trying to do this type of work.
Yeah, I mean it's tragic because like a good, high focal length APO is really expensive for most people. I mean, I happen to get a really good deal because of some of my notoriety with some of my work, and then Scott Roberts gave me a really good deal. I couldn't refuse. Normally that 165 is around 12, 13,000. I got it for.
Oh, Roger says a price. Go.
What's that?
What do you do, or how do you handle processing when you have lots of space junk, Starlink or other satellites coming into the images that that can cause problems? How do you go about? Do you just delete those, or do you use the special stacking software like Sequitur that allows you to process those images? What's your process there?
So I'm guessing by that question that you don't use PixInsight?
No, I use Photoshop, and I use some of the other software, but I do not know PixInsight at all.
So PixInsight, I don't know about some other ones, but they do pixel rejection. So when it comes to star trails, or when it comes to satellites, or when it comes to a freaking 747 going through your frames, it deletes that information. I know there's other ones out there like Deep Sky Stacker. I don't know if it has rejection algorithms with it or not, but PixInsight's rejection algorithms are very good. Elon Musk can, throw up 50 more rockets full of satellites, and I'm not going to have a problem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so Deep Sky Stacker, which is the one I've been using, does not have that capability. Okay. But Sequitur, which I've recently discovered, does. So I've been trying to incorporate that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those rejection algorithms are very important, not only from things flying into your frame, but when it comes to like hot pixels, for example. CMOS cameras will throw out a lot of hot pixels. It will reject some of that stuff too. So it just it does a really good job. I know it's kind of pricey. It's like $300 some odd, and this is just a freaking hobby that we're not going to ever make any money off of. But it's definitely a headache saver, especially with pre-processing.
Do you have a YouTube channel that you occasionally provide tutorials? I've seen you appear on Chuck's Astrophotography. I believe he's one of your neighbors in Detroit. He's got a regular YouTube channel. He's
done a lot of tutorials. Unfortunately I run an advertising production company. I don't have a lot of time to do tutorials. My buddy Chuck, he's kind of retired, so he has a little bit more time on his hands to do those sort of things. I would love to retire and just do astrophotography, but that's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I just got a message, and Chris just posted a message that Chuck is watching you, Doug. So you make sure that you don't diss him or anything like that.
Oh no, I love Chuck. Me and him started out at the same time. We both started out in 2016, and we've grown together with this hobby a lot. And we've had many phone calls crying on each other's shoulders.
So, well, you know, I was kidding, but
he's a great guy, and he's a great astrophotographer. And we've both struggled dealing with some of the same things that we do here. I guess maybe the past couple of years we kind of focused on different objects that we shoot. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Okay. Any more questions? And again, folks that are new to astronomy, Doug has some fantastic photos. This is on his AstroBin site. I don't know if you can go back and put the address on the AstroBin. Chris is telling me I don't have any questions from YouTube, so that's. But don't be afraid to ask. We have the privilege of having somebody on that does this at a high level. So take the opportunity if you have a question.
The biggest. Oh, go ahead.
It sounds like you've never tried one-shot color. You're strictly a monochrome camera guy.
I did one-shot color for a few months in the very beginning, back in 2016, and I realized due to my light pollution, it gave me less control over how I process each channel. And when you're dealing with this amount of light pollution, it's imperative that you have control over each channel, and that's why I've been using mono since. The biggest takeaway, if I were to say anything, is patience. You need to set up your telescope and just let it go. Some of these images I'll spend a month on. There's been times where in the spring, where it's a very rainy season here, I've spent a couple months just gathering integration time, and you just let it go. And you have other hobbies, you have other interests, or maybe you work at night, which is kind of what I do a lot, and you just focus on that and just kind of let it go and monitor it from here to there, and patience. That's all. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had one final question to get around the light pollution. Have you considered gathering data remotely from remote telescopes?
I'm glad you asked that, actually. I've had many opportunities to do remote. I've had some opportunities to send my equipment places or to rent time on telescopes for a discounted rate. And as funny as this is going to sound, I love the challenge of saying, yeah, I pulled this out from near Detroit. And I love being able to say that. I mean, when I'm in a particular magazine or whatever, I don't think they give two hoots, where it came from. But me personally, I love saying that I've been able to do this where I'm at.
All right. Well, greatly appreciate your time and putting the presentation together. I'm going to ask one more time. I thought I heard somebody come on. Are there any other questions? Let me check the chat. Magnificent work from Bill. No questions from YouTube. So at that point, you're welcome to stay on. It's going to be just our business meeting, but at that point, we'll turn it back over to Michelle and to the rest of the club meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You take care.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was fantastic. Okay, let me see if I can get this set back up here. Oh, before, am I still on here? Okay, I can't tell. Before I get started, I got a question on a chat where someone had asked me if I would pan the room for them so they can see what this meeting room looks like, since we may be able to get here for 2 or 3 months in a row. So let me go ahead. I have no idea how this is going to look, but this is the meeting room we're in right now. So there's plenty of room for anybody who wants to come. We've got tables we can set up if we want to. I'm sure we have access to more chairs. And so for those of you who might want to come in the future, that'll give you an idea of what we're looking at here. And it's an arrangement where it's sort of, we can do with it what we want. So we can set chairs as close together, as far apart, tables or no tables. So we do have some freedom in that respect. So hopefully that gives everybody an idea of what we're looking like in here. Okay, and as Ed said, we will be going to our business meeting portion. So one of the first things we do go ahead and talk about is the e-group mailing list. For those of you who are new to the club, we do have a lot of families in our club. We've had a lot of families who joined this year. The question always is, everybody wants the information, but we can't really have 5 or 6 emails associated with the same account, because trying to keep track of who is and who isn't supposed to be on our group gets to be complicated. So what we recommend, somebody came up with a great idea. If a family will establish a general account, like a Gmail account, that everybody from the family can access, and that specifically is where all of your FWAS information and the e-group information can go to, then everybody can access it just by going through the internet, and everybody has access to the same information without having to have 5 or 6 different email addresses. And again, I wanted to say a thank you to all of the new members who've been following the rules and making sure that when you go out to the dark sites for the first time, you hook up with some of the seasoned photographers or observers to get out to the sites. That's very important. So if there's some reason you put a message out on the e-group and you don't get an answer if somebody's going out, not everybody checks their email, every 10 minutes or so, and it may not ping at them. So you may just put the message out one more time, and then I'm going to ask the seasoned members, if you're getting ready to go to a dark site, if you'll check your emails just before you leave your house to see if anybody has tagged on and wants to meet up somewhere so that they can figure out how to get to one of the dark sites, that'll be helpful in getting everybody put together. One of the questions, Pam Plopper is here, and one of the questions she was asking is, when do we get to have a picnic? Especially for your new members. When I joined in 2012, one of the things that was great was about twice a year we have a club picnic under normal circumstances, where we're out at Thompson's. We have a barbecue grill going. We have a couple of guys who are cooking burgers and hot dogs, and people bring potluck, and we just have a fun time. And we have members, we have their families, and then after we have all that fun in the afternoon, we go out to the pads and we do observing as a group. So again, at this point in time, as far as we know, the Thompson rules they're still restricting the numbers of people. So as soon as we can get that lifted and get a group out there, then we will go ahead and do that. So hopefully in the next few months, that'll be a good orientation for the new members. That's where I learned to use a telescope, because I came into the club without a telescope. And I still remember Sean Kirchdorfer pulling out one of the Dobbs from the clubhouse that is club equipment and showing me how to use it and how to set the telerad and all that stuff. So you'll have members out there who can help you learn stuff. You can see different telescopes and see what you might want to work with at that point in time. So hopefully we will be able to do a picnic sometime in the next few months. And we do that at Thompson, obviously, because we have better facilities to handle a large group. If you're doing barbecue, you want to have access to water or something. It's not something we really want to try to handle at Star Ranch. So as soon as everything opens up, we'll get back to our picnics. Want to remind everyone that next month we have our elections. And so if you've been a member of the club for at least a year, you're eligible to fill one of the board positions or one of the officers' positions. I'm willing to continue for another year. If anybody else is interested, speak to me. That's fine. There's nothing that says you can't run. Our vice presidency, we really need someone to fill Ed's shoes because he's at the end of his second year, and according to our bylaws, the executive positions need to, that you can take them for 2 years in a row, but after that, we need to go to somebody else. So if you have any questions on what Ed does, reach out to Ed via email or give him a phone call, anything like that. Our treasurer, again, if you'd like to talk to us about being a treasurer, that's great. John Geromini, our current treasurer, has agreed he'll go for another year. But again, if you're interested, let us know. We have a secretary position that's still open. I know Zach is taking notes for us right now, and as the acting secretary, I'm hoping that he will want to be the secretary. But again, if you're interested in that position, please let us know, talk to us, and we'll let you know. We have 4 board members who are just sort of general board members for the executive board, and they alternate. They're 2-year positions, and then 2 of them run for 2 years, and then the 2 others run on an off year. So we've got 2 members who are currently in the middle of their 2-year term, but we've got 2 board positions that will become open so that we'll need people who will fill those board positions. If you're looking for a good entry level and you want to get in on some of what happens with the club and help with decisions and give your opinion, a lot of people will start as just a general board member. So again, if you're interested, let us know, email me, call me. We'll work with that because we will have those elections in June, and those new officers will be taking their positions in July. There was something else I wanted to say about, for those of you who are thinking about a possible board position or officer's position, wanted to let you know you're not left high and dry, because we've always had a very good turnover of the new board member. The new executive officer does get help from the previous holder of the office to help them transition and figure out what to do. It's not like we just throw a bunch of stuff at you and say, here, have fun. Everybody will help you with that, really. Speaking of board members, we do have a couple of things that we talked about at last week's board position or board meeting that I just wanted to let you know are sort of going on here in the background. One of the items is an all-sky camera at Thompson's. We're looking into that as a possibility. It would be a camera that basically faces the sky that would be accessible to the club members. I'm told it's something that even I couldn't mess up. If I got on there, I could see, but it's not like I could mess up the camera or point it down towards the ground to look at the deer or something like that and mess it up for everybody. But it would be something that you could view the sky, you could view the weather, and that's something we're looking at investing in at Thompson's, if Thompson's will allow us. It's still in the early planning stages. Zach Smith is working on that. He's on the Zoom call in I saw, but he's looking into all of the details that I would not be able to figure out. How much bandwidth, will the Wi-Fi support it, blah 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 blah. So I'm glad we have people like that in the club, but he is going to be working with Mike Honor, getting in touch with Thompson's. We still have to go to their foundation, see if it would be something they would even allow us to do. But that's sort of working in the background, and hopefully we'll be able to see that come to fruition in the near future. One of the other things that the board talked about and decided on at last week's meeting was the donation to the Astronomical League. This year, they're still having a virtual convention instead of having a convention in person. And at the board meeting, they did ask for donations, and we voted as a board to make a $200 donation to help support that convention this year. Then John is actually here in person, and you should be able to share your screen. He'll probably talk to us, but I'm going to turn everything over to John so he can share with us his information from the treasurer's side.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I know you can hear me.
I'm hearing you through these little white sticks in my ear.
Okay. So if you can see the screen, then you can read the dollars. The members, we maxed out, I think, at 173. We've actually had members join in March and April. Oh, April and May, I'm sorry, which is something I don't think we've had happen before. But due to people moving, we've had several people have left to go to other states. One of the major thing that's happening right now is renewals. We've sent 2 emails so far, and this is the status of those emails as of this morning. I think since I acquired the PayPal information, I don't know, noonish time this morning. I think when I looked there before I came here, I think there's another 4 or 5 people that are on there. But we're only at 40% of people that have renewed, and we're halfway through the month. So these are always concerning. We hope if you're listening and you haven't renewed that you will do so. There will be one final email sent sometime close to the first of the month, and that'll be the last time. So I think that's all I want to talk about.
Okay.
All right, thank you, John. And if you'll read his email that he sent, I think you need to take your screen off. There we go. Sometimes it takes a while. For those of you who read John's email, he does give you options. If you don't want to go through all the technological computer stuff or you can't figure it out, you can still write a check and send it to, I think, did you have him send it to your address, John? So you can always do it that way. I know we're still without the convenience of, 50 people in a meeting and 50 checks being handed to the treasurer, which is what has always happened in the past. So we just are working in other directions right now, but you do still have that option if you want to send a check through the mail, and just get that to John to complete your membership. And if you do that, send an email maybe to him so that he knows it's in the mail and to look for it. Okay. Talk a little bit about outreach, and we already have earlier talked about our star party at Candy Hills. Again, does not look hopeful for this month. I forgot to look up if we don't have our star party this Saturday. Pam, do you remember the date in June?
I think it's June 22nd.
Okay, she's thinking it's June 22nd. We will get that word out there. So if we don't have luck this month, hopefully in June we will. So again, anybody who can get out there with a telescope that hooks up to a computer would be absolutely fantastic. If our star party happens this weekend, I'll be out there basically to help just sort of monitor lines. And again, have not read the governor's orders, do not know how they read, do not know how they will affect us. At the very minimum, we should be able to request that everyone wear a mask. I think that what I heard on the news just in passing as I was going through the Burger King, at least you can make the request. Whether you can tack it on their face or not, I don't know. So we will just have to go through that. Virtual star parties obviously can still happen and should be recorded on the Night Sky Network. And that's the other thing about the camera that we're talking about. One of the good points about it is we will be able to use that for an outreach program. It's actually designed, Zach says, that it'll count meteors. So when we've got meteor showers that are going on, you can observe the meteor shower from the comfort of your room by looking through the sky camera at Thompson. And it will also count the meteors that go through the sky so that we can report that data to the American Meteor Society, who counts all that information. So that camera can serve quite a number of purposes. One of the items I think that Tom Roth brought up at the board meeting was, not only can we use it for outreach, but as we start looking at the different avenues that we want to take, as far as investing either in Palo Pinto Mountains or SOFAR or remote observing, anything along those lines, the fact that it helps with outreach will just be one more step that helps us if we want to start applying for grant money. So it's just another opening for us in that respect. I know that at our board meeting, Ed had some information for us. I don't know if he's ready to put it in front of the club right now. He's just gathering information and putting it together for the board. But he and Mark are continuing to look at opportunities. And Ed, I know you're still on there. Do you have anything you want to share with the group tonight as a whole?
Like you said, I'm still finalizing the report, but the general takeaway, and I think John and John Geronimi and Mark will validate it, is that the SMS ranch, and that's where we had the presentation on the SOFAR observatory. That's where it's located. It is a beautiful site and is just about as, short of the Davis Mountains. It's going to be one of the better places for a dark sky site. It's as dark or darker than Star, and it's also surrounded by 15,000 acres of undeveloped property. Along with being a site next to an observatory, there's a common purpose there, so everyone will respect the light pollution issues and the security of equipment. And Chris Swenson, who is the president of the corporation that owns the Swenson Ranches, the SMS Ranch, is very inviting, very encouraging, and it would be a lease agreement, so it would not be a large capital investment from the club's treasury. It would be an ongoing expense to have a lease, but it would not involve a tremendous amount of money up front. Like I said, I'll finish the report and send it on to the board, and then the board and the officers can decide, and we can share at the next meeting, and present to the club at large what the options are, and what the possibilities are. It is a good distance out. It's if you're north Fort Worth, it's about 130 miles. If you're south Fort Worth, it's about 150 miles. It's up by Throckmorton. But the reality of our situation is if you want a Bortle Class 2 sky, that's where you got to go. That's about as close as you're going to get. Star's a little bit closer, and that's also a lease agreement. And but all of these sites offer different opportunities, and that's something we need to discuss. Both with the officers and with the members at large, and how folks would want to use and want to develop a site like that. And that's basically all I have right now to share. John and Mark, if they wanted to chime in, go ahead.
Okay, I don't hear any other chiming, so we'll move on. Thank you very much, Ed. We do appreciate you and your committee's work on getting all of that information together for us. Is George Lutch still on Zoom? I think, do you want to say anything about Prime Focus? Okay, I guess I don't hear George. George, for those of you who don't know, he's taken charge of our Prime Focus. It's sort of our monthly newsletter. And so if you have anything you want to add to that, he's more than welcome. He'll take articles, he'll take information. I know Matt McCuller a lot of times will do some book reviews for him. Let me open it up to any other board members that might want to have anything to discuss. I've got everybody an ability to unmute themselves. So if you have something you want to bring up, please do.
Just an update on the Tandy Star Party for June. It's actually June 19th.
Oh, thank you. June 19th. I appreciate that.
That's all I had.
I had one other thing, Michelle, as an officer. We're putting together the effort to inventory the equipment and the material owned by the club. And what I would like to ask members that have equipment at their house, I know some folks have telescopes or equipment, cameras, whatever it is that they have. If they could do a little write-up, a little spreadsheet, this is the description, the item, and who has it, where it's located. If they could send it to me by email or I don't know, or send it to me. Yeah. That way there's one place to get it. I know Cy is busy. I'm retired. I got nothing else to do, so except whatever my wife tells me I have to do. But yeah, I think we have equipment spread all over. I know I have the projector that we used to use when we had our meetings in person. That would be an inventory type of thing. And so to help the effort, anybody that has club equipment that happen to have it at their house, please send me an email with what you have and where it is and what condition it's in and that type of thing.
You want to know if it's in my closet or is it in my office?
Okay, does anybody else from the board have something they want to share with the club?
I got a letter from Palo Pinto friends.
Uh-huh.
I don't know who it was addressed to, because I have a membership there and club has a membership, so I don't know who it was addressed to. Regardless, there was a marathon out there recently.
Okay.
And, I know we all run it really bad. But apparently it was very well received and they had a lot of people.
Okay.
So my suggestion is when that comes up again, we probably have a look at putting a table out there.
Excellent idea. For those that did that information come through the Zoom call? For those of you who couldn't hear,
yeah, thank you.
John was telling us he got some information from Palo Pinto Friends, and they had a marathon out there and was apparently well attended. John has a great suggestion when they have events like that. It would be a good idea for FWAS to have a table out there. So that's something we want to consider as a possibility when they do have something going on out there. Okay. All right. Is there anything else? Anybody in general, not just a board member, anybody else have questions? Something they want to share?
Yes, I do, Michelle. This is Richard Hoffman. I have a question for Ed, actually. I was just curious as to the number of responses he's been receiving for the survey he sent out regarding the club's future activities.
Richard, I got 38 responses and summarized those, put them in a spreadsheet, sent it to the board and the officers. I think that's, and part of my report on the investigation for the dark sky site at SMS includes a summary of the desires of the club. One of the things that is of concern is that we had only 38 responses. If we have, if we have 170 members, it would be good for folks to let us know what their desires are. Do they do astrophotography? Are they only interested in visual? How far would they be willing to drive? What facilities would they like to have at a dark sky site? So that's, but the results that I got seem fairly representative of what I would expect, and also from what I've heard verbally from folks, as they've talked about using dark sky sites, other than avoiding rattlesnakes and things like that. There's the usual, that the sky is the important part. It's great to have some electricity. It's really great to have a toilet. And if you have to drive 3 hours to get to it, it's nice to be able to stay overnight or, crash in your car, not literally, as in sleep in your car or whatever, before you make the perilous drive home. Seeing Doug's Dodge crashed on his front lawn was kind of a startling image there. To have somebody jump the curb, I guess, and crash into your car in your driveway is always not something you expect. But so that's why crashing your car was on my mind. So I think the responses are fairly representative, and I'll present those with the report.
Yeah, what's the timeline to share that?
Actually, I shared the preliminary report with Mark and John. They gave me their comments. I'm going to incorporate those. And by the end of the week, I'll have it out. I've got illustrations and maps and all that type of stuff in it. I'll have it out to the board by the end of the week. And we'll have time for input and corrections and thoughts so that we can present it to the club at the next business meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ed.
And that may be the part of the presentation for the next business meeting. Although I'm going to put John on the spot. He mentioned, and I think it's a great idea, doing a short presentation on using the groups IO, the websites, Night Sky Network, all that type of stuff for the membership too. So our presentation next month may be a pseudo business presentation. What's going on with dark sky, what's going on with our IT, what's going on with the resources that the club has that maybe new members aren't familiar with. So John, you're on the spot.
Okay, does anybody else out there have questions?
And Michelle, there's a chat. Somebody wanted an update on 3RF.
3RF. I have not spoken with Katie recently. When I spoke with her a few weeks ago, they were still working to get everything put together for after their damage that they had during the February freeze. They were hoping to get that done by their star party in June on the 12th. So I'm not sure how quickly that's moving. We do have an opportunity for a 3RF grouping in July, but it would be the July 3rd, 4th weekend. And the drawback to that would be, especially for any of the astrophotographers probably, if you're in a rural area, you're going to have people all over the place putting fireworks up there. And I was not sure if that would be a good thing to have going on while we're trying to look at the sky. Our next opportunity will be in August. And so I was going to go for August. So that'll give us a few months through the end of the year if we end up getting rained out or clouded out and have to move it. Comments on that? Okay. Anybody else? Is there anything else on chat that I've missed? Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well, then we will call it an evening. Thank you to everybody on Zoom. Thank you to everybody who came here. Again, this is our meeting place. Hold it there. Everybody wants to see who's here. Oh. There we go. I can't see when I'm doing this, and I could not figure out how to reverse the camera on the Zoom. So hopefully we'll see more of you here next month. And next month I'll try to have something put out there so it's maybe a little easier to find where we are. For those of you who are astrophotographers, obviously you've been out here a couple of times if you were here with us pre-pandemic, because our groups would meet out here in this room. Again, the advantage is we can put as many chairs out as we want or need, spread out. We've got tables if we want to use tables. So, and it's not costing us any money. They're letting us use it for free. So that's fantastic. So hopefully they will let us use it through the summer until we can get back to UNT. Obviously, UNT is just much more centrally located for some of our club members who are out in Weatherford and things like that. So yeah, we do have projector facilities, although we actually do have a projector screen here. And so, yeah, Phil had asked if we need it. So we do have access here in this room to our projector screen. And we also have a television screen, and that also has a plug-in for an HDMI cable. It even tells you which port to plug into. So if we can get a computer and hook up HDMI from the computer to the television, we should be able to everybody watch the Zoom instead of watching it on our little phones and iPads. We should have a screen to be able to do that if we end up with a Zoom presentation again. But hopefully we'll just start getting more and more people coming back and visiting in person because it is so much better. Okay.
Yeah, Michelle,
right.
one thing on the HDMI screens or cables.
Yes.
It's usually helpful if you got like a 6 or 10 foot one. If you only got a 3 foot, you can almost have the laptop up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just stand here and hold the computer.
That's what we did at the Young Astronomers, but we ended up leaving the cable there. We had about a 10 footer. So
yeah.
I
so
can buy
we do have some.
I can get one if we need to. So
I'll let you know.
I've got some. I think we've got some HDMI cables with the projector.
Okay.
And so I'll go through all the cables that we have, and if not, I'm sure I have an HDMI cable laying around that I've used for other clubs, other meetings, a long cable so that, like Sai said, you don't have to be standing on your head with the computer up on your feet.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you, everybody, and y'all have a good night and safe trip home. Bye-bye.
Sai, did you want to talk about the